Let's get back to some of these email questions. This from Wes. He says, we just had another fire at the chemical plant in Elmira, and now the application for the biogas plant is currently in front of the ministry. Will the Conservatives stop this ridiculous legislation of overriding local government and letting them build these plants wherever they want, regardless of how detrimental they will be to the surrounding area?
Absolutely, yes. We will restore local decision-making ability, respect local councils, and let local residents have their say.
Okay. See how easy that was. This from Duncan. Tim says he's a supporter of the Harper Conservatives. Just wonder then why he's against the HST.
The HST has been brought in across the country, right? Other provinces did it, Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, I think Quebec, BC. What was unique about Ontario is that you took the same rate, 8%, and you slapped it across a whole new bunch of goods and services, haircuts,
right?
Some of the basics like heat, hydro, and gas, and you didn't reduce the rate, you didn't have any big exemptions. When other provinces brought it in, they at least lowered the combined rate, so you got a break on one hand. BC exempted gasoline. Dalton McGuinty was unique in turning it into a massive tax grab on the backs of families. And that's why we fought it, because it is nothing more than another greedy tax grab.
What do you think of the BC legislation? I'm not quite sure how it works, but that recall area they have where if they don't like what's going on, if they get X number of percentage or whatever, they can actually say, okay, we're going to go back and we're going to do this again, and you're going to listen to us this time. Does that have merit?
I think it can work in areas, right? Or tools like that with this recall referendum. In fact, I've asked one of my MPPs, Steve Clark, he's from Leeds Grenville in Eastern Ontario, to look at the models they use in BC and elsewhere. We actually used to have a referendum law in Ontario that if you tried to bring in a tax hike and you didn't campaign on it, you'd had to go back to the people and get a vote approving that. It was called the Taxpayer Protection Act. And unfortunately, when Dalton McGuinty got in office, he ripped that up, and that's how he was able to bring in first the health tax and now the HST. I do believe we need something to give protection to voters in between elections, not just every 4 years.
Okay, but to be clear, that wasn't a health tax. That was a premium.
Sorry, my mistake.
Randy, you're on 570 News.
Hi, Gary.
Hi.
First of all, I just want to say thanks for getting the leaders of the parties on. It's a great opportunity to get some answers. And Mr. Hudak, I was just wondering, the Sunshine List, I heard you just touch on it about with the McGuinty government and how it's tripled in size. Just wondering what your party would do to keep that list from expanding, and would you even consider for, I'm not talking about the frontline people like the police officers that are on the beat and the firemen out there putting out the fires. I'm not talking about them, but the ones that are on that Sunshine List, to possibly freezing some wages for a number of years or what have you.
Didn't we have a wage freeze already? I thought there was a provincial wage freeze on.
I think you could be a little sarcastic.
Well, I have my moments.
Yes, you do.
Yeah, well, you're right. The Premier brought in a so-called wage freeze, but the exemption was the unions who can go to public interest arbitration. So if you're non-union, you got frozen. But if you were union, you can go to arbitrators. You did not. And as a result, we got some agreements 2-3% a year, which is a lot more than zero. So here's what I would do to get down to whittle down this kind of expansion of the Sunshine List. First, fix the broken arbitration system. I just think it is no longer reflecting the ability of families to pay the bills. You're getting agreements of 2-3% a year when in the private sector, if you're on pension and retired, you don't get anything near that. Secondly, the arbitrators, when they thumb their nose at the province and at taxpayers, they often take the deals from the biggest, most affluent communities and slap it down on those who are less affluent. That doesn't make sense either. Other thing I would do, we got to start closing down some of these bureaucracies who no longer add anything to our system or become redundant. I'll give you 2 examples. These regional health bureaucracies called the LHINs. They take about $250 million so far out of healthcare to fuel these fat layers of middle management. I can't remember the number now, but I know they've gone up, I think, 8 or more fold, the number of making $100,000 a year in these LHINs. I've said as Premier, I would close the doors on those LHINs entirely and use the savings to put into frontline health care for families. The second one, Gary, something called the Ontario Power Authority. This is a new hydro bureaucracy that's grown from 13 employees now to about 300. I think that is a total waste of money. I think it's driving up the hydro bills, and I've said I would close down the Ontario Power Authority as well and pass on the savings to the hydro customer.
Well, the Sunshine List, the Ontario OPG's president is number 1 on the list. Hydro One's president is number 3 on the list, so you're not going to get a lot of arguments unless, of course, you work at Hydro. Jim, you're next. You're on 570 News.
Well, thanks for taking my call. I could have sworn I would be the one person you'd screen the most, but hey.
Well, no, why would I do that?
It's not too late.
I don't know.
It's not too late, Jim.
You thought I was sarcastic. Go ahead, Jim.
Well, Mr. Hudak, thanks for taking my call. I always applaud a politician that has the cojones to take direct questions from the public, unlike Mr. Ignatieff. But that's another story. I would like to know when, and I stress when, the Conservatives get into power, what can we expect in terms of Caledonia? Can we expect to get to the bottom of why the OPP ignored court orders, why Mr. Fantino got away with what he did, why Mr. McGuinty got away with what he did, and can we at least stop paying for the hydro that's going into those houses that they took over?
Absolutely. I mean, it is ridiculous that hydro customers right now are seeing skyrocketing bills. Believe it or not, Gary, as Jim pointed out, are paying for hydro to go into one of those occupied homes at the Douglas Creek Estates in Caledonia. So this is a place where the occupiers are, I guess, residing or camping out or what have you. You're paying the hydro bill to keep that going. That makes no sense. And how does that help bring this to a conclusion? So, yes, we would cut that off. Secondly, when it comes to getting to the bottom of it, the Ontario PCs have called for an inquiry. I don't think it has to be some big multi-million-dollar production. But we need some basic answers. How did we get into this mess? Was there any connection between the Premier's office, the politics, and the situation that frontline police officers, the impossible situation that frontline police officers were put into during the Caledonia conflict? I think we need answers so we make sure that we don't get into this kind of mess again that is now, 5 years?
5 plus. Yeah,
and
5
counting.
plus. Yeah. And I checked. Hallmark did not have a card ready for that anniversary. Steve, you're at 570 News.
Yeah, I got to applaud you, too, for taking direct answers because you never know what they're going to say, and here's one of them.
We can cut Steve off then, right?
Hello?
Had I only known. Yeah, go ahead.
The lower class, I understand, because I had been lower class at one time, and I don't like the actual term of classes, but I've got my way to middle class now, and I'm trying to get higher, but like everybody. But they don't pay the taxes, which they don't have the money to pay taxes. But the higher classes pay not a fair amount. Now, I'm stuck in the middle with a lot of people, and I'm wondering, what are you doing for them? Because a lot of us are stuck, and we don't get any help. And, I mean, if a lot of them don't even have benefits. So what are you doing for those people? I'll hang up and listen.
All right. Thanks, Steve.
No, thanks for the question, Steve. And I'm going to make a pitch again. Gary, we put a number of ideas again at our website called haveyoursayontario.ca. Encourage Steve and your listeners to go there to talk about some of these ideas. I mentioned earlier some of the savings we're looking at on the taxation side. They take the HST off the basics like heat, hydro, gas, reducing the rate. Steve might be interested in the income tax option there. Secondly, we need to get some relief on the hydro bills, right? I mean, they're skyrocketing. We're signing these contracts for up to 80 cents per kilowatt hour for power for solar projects. Wind also very expensive, and the price of power is 5 or 6 cents in the marketplace. I would end those massive subsidies. We cannot continue down this path. We can support renewable energy, but it needs to be a transparent and competitive process so you get the best deal for families. The second thing we've put in our sights is this debt retirement charge. We've been paying that now since 2002. When the debt retirement charge was brought in, you're supposed to pay down $7.8 billion in hydro debt. To date, using the government's own figures, we're now over $7.8 billion. So why is it still there? We've called for a forensic audit to say, where'd the money go, how much is remaining, and when will it come off the bills? And if we've paid it, take it off the bills.
All right. Keith wants to know what went wrong with Norm Sterling. Why was there the divide between you and Norm Sterling?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't describe it that way. Norm Sterling, for those that might not know, is our member for Eastern Ontario. He's a longtime veteran, I think first elected in 1977, if I recall. And Norm lost the nomination last night to be the PC candidate in the next election. We do have a democratic process in the PC party. Even I can be challenged in my riding if somebody thinks that they make a better representative for the PC party, and the members decide. Democracy sometimes can be a difficult process, but it is an important part of our culture in Canada and our PC party. So Norm was up against another local PC named Jack McLaren. Jack got more votes from the local PCs. It's tough because Norm in many ways was a bit of a mentor to many of us. He's a veteran member. There's no textbook on how to be an MPP. And so you look to veterans like that. So it's a tough loss for us as a PC caucus, as a family, that Norm won't be the candidate for us the next time around. It is, however, part of the culture of our party that we all have to stay accountable to our ridings and respect that the local PC members make the decision. And that's why Norm lost the nomination last night, because the other candidate, Jack McLaren, had more votes.
He got more votes.
He
so
did.
It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
We are right out of time, and I still got a bunch of questions on email. And if you're on hold and we had to let you go, we do apologize for that. And I know I didn't get to all the email questions, and sometimes I pick and choose on those, so we don't get all wind energy questions on at the same time.
Can I add one more, too? I was just talking about the hydro bills. One thing my answer is a bit long. Smart meters is another thing that I've strongly opposed. I just think these smart meters are nothing more than tax machines to take more money out of people's wallets. And not everybody can get up at 11 o'clock or midnight to do the laundry. So I've said as Premier, I'd unplug the mandatory smart meter program and give every family a choice, because not every family can be the same.
And those meters can be recycled, so we can use the metal again. Tim Hudak, come back anytime. Thanks for spending the time with us today.
My pleasure, Gary. Thanks for having me on.
This is